I always hated doing laundry. Our washing machine was in the basement, and something about that place just felt off. It wasn't anything I could really put my finger on. The basement was finished and everything, with carpet and walls, but it still gave me the creeps. My parents always said I was being dramatic when I complained about going down there. Last month, my parents went out of town for a long weekend to visit my aunt. My older brother was supposed to watch me, but he ended up staying at his girlfriend's place pretty much the whole time. So I had the house to myself for 3 days straight. I was actually excited about it at first. No one telling me what to do. I could eat whatever I wanted, stay up late playing games. It seemed perfect. Friday night went fine. I ordered pizza, played video games until like 2 a.m., and fell asleep on the couch. Saturday morning, I woke up and realized I was completely out of clean clothes. All my stuff was dirty and sitting in a pile in my room. I really didn't want to go down to the basement, but I had no choice. I couldn't wear the same shirt for the 3rd day in a row. I grabbed my laundry basket and headed downstairs. The basement always felt colder than the rest of the house, even in summer. I dumped my clothes in the washer, added detergent, and started the cycle. The whole time I was down there, I kept feeling like someone was watching me. I know that sounds stupid, but I couldn't shake it. I kept turning around, expecting to see someone, but obviously no one was there. I ran back upstairs as soon as the washer started and tried to forget about it. But about an hour later, I heard this weird thumping sound coming from downstairs. It was rhythmic, like someone was hitting the wall or something. I figured it was just the washing machine being loud. Our washer was pretty old and made all kinds of noises. But then I remembered I had put the clothes in on a short cycle, and it should have been done already. I really didn't want to go back down there, but I needed to move my stuff to the dryer. I slowly made my way down the basement stairs, and sure enough, the washer had stopped. But as I was transferring my wet clothes to the dryer, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were muddy footprints on the basement floor that definitely weren't there before, and they weren't mine either. Mine were from my sneakers, but these looked like they came from work boots or something. They led from the small basement window over to where I was standing, then back to the window again. I was freaking out, but I tried to convince myself that maybe my brother had come home and gone down to the basement for something, even though that didn't really make sense since he never went down there either. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted him asking if he had been to the house, but he didn't respond. I finished putting my clothes in the dryer and got out of there as fast as I could. I went upstairs and locked the basement door, even though I knew that was probably pointless if someone was really down there. I spent the rest of Saturday trying to distract myself with TV and games, but I kept thinking about those footprints. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard that thumping again. This time, it was definitely coming from the basement, and it was louder than before. It sounded like someone was moving furniture around or something. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet and just sat in my bed, waiting for morning. Sunday was the worst day. I was exhausted and paranoid. I knew I needed to get my clothes from the dryer, but there was no way I was going down there alone. I called my brother like 10 times, but he never picked up. I even thought about calling my parents, but I didn't want them to think I was being a baby. Finally, around dinner time, I worked up the courage to go downstairs. I unlocked the basement door and slowly walked down the steps. Everything looked normal at first. My clothes were still in the dryer, and the muddy footprints had been cleaned up. That should have been relieving, but it actually made me more scared. Who cleaned them up? I quickly grabbed my clothes and was about to leave when I noticed something else. Our basement had this small storage room in the back corner that we used for Christmas decorations and old furniture. The door to that room was slightly open, and I knew for a fact that it had been closed when I was down there yesterday. I should have just left right then. I should have run upstairs and called the police. But curiosity got the better of me. I slowly walked over to the storage room and pushed the door open. Inside, I found a makeshift bed made out of old blankets and pillows from our guest room. There were empty food containers scattered around, and a few of our kitchen knives were sitting on a cardboard box, like it was some kind of table. But what really made me sick was seeing several of my family photos that had been taken from around the house. They were arranged in a circle around the makeshift bed. I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Heavy footsteps, like work boots on wood. I spun around and saw a man about my dad's age coming down the basement stairs. He was dirty and looked like he hadn't showered in weeks. When he saw me, he didn't run or try to hide. He just smiled this creepy smile and said, "You're finally home." I dropped my laundry basket and ran. I pushed past him on the stairs and sprinted to the front door. I didn't stop running until I got to my neighbor's house 3 blocks away. They called the police while I sat in their kitchen, shaking and trying to explain what happened. When the cops showed up at my house, they found the guy still in the basement. Turns out he had been living there for almost 2 weeks. He had been coming and going through that small basement window, which explained the muddy footprints. The scariest part was that he had been watching our family for months before he actually moved in. He knew our schedules, when we left for work and school, everything. My parents came home immediately, and we stayed in a hotel for a week while they had the house completely searched and all the locks changed. We also had that basement window sealed up permanently. I still live at home, but I absolutely refuse to go in the basement anymore. My mom does all the laundry now, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever feel completely safe in that house again. Every time I hear a noise at night, I wonder if someone else has found a way in. This happened about 6 years ago when I was working my first real job out of high school. I got hired as a night security guard at this small office building downtown. It wasn't anything fancy, just 3 floors with some insurance companies, a dentist office, and a few other random businesses. The pay was decent for what it was, and honestly, I liked the quiet. I've always been more of a night person anyway. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most nights were pretty boring. I'd walk around the building a few times, check all the doors, and then sit at the front desk reading or watching stuff on my phone. The building had this old security system with cameras that barely worked half the time, so mostly I just relied on walking around and listening for anything weird. About 2 months into the job, I started noticing little things that seemed off, like I'd find lights on in offices that I was pretty sure I had turned off earlier, or sometimes a door would be unlocked that I remembered checking. At first, I figured I was just being forgetful. Working nights can mess with your head, and I was still getting used to the routine. But then, one Thursday night around 2 a.m., I was doing my usual walkthrough of the second floor when I heard typing coming from one of the offices. It was steady, like someone was actually working. I thought maybe one of the employees had come in late to catch up on something, even though that had never happened before. I knocked on the door and called out, but the typing stopped immediately and no one answered. I tried the door handle, but it was locked. I had a master key for all the offices, so I unlocked it and flipped on the lights. The office was completely empty, but the computer was on and there was a document open on the screen. It looked like someone had been typing up some kind of report or something. The weird thing was, the last line just said, "He's coming up the stairs now," over and over again. I shut down the computer and locked the office back up. I told myself it was probably just some software glitch, or maybe the employee had been working remotely and left their computer on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next few nights were quiet, but I started paying more attention to everything. I'd make mental notes of exactly which lights were on, which doors were locked, where everything was positioned, and sure enough, things kept getting moved around. Small stuff, but enough to notice. Then on Tuesday night, I was sitting at the front desk when I heard the elevator ding. The elevator was right behind me, and I definitely hadn't called it. I turned around and watched the doors open, but no one got out. The elevator just sat there with the doors open for about 30 seconds before they closed again. I checked the security panel to see if maybe someone had used a key card to get in, but there were no entries logged. I walked over to the elevator and hit the call button. When the doors opened, I could smell cigarette smoke, which was weird because the whole building was non-smoking. I decided to check every floor again, just to be safe. First floor was normal. Second floor seemed fine, but when I got to the third floor, I noticed that the door to the stairwell was propped open with a small rock. I knew for a fact that door had been closed when I checked earlier. I walked through the stairwell door and started climbing to the roof access, thinking maybe someone had gotten up there somehow. But halfway up the stairs, I heard footsteps below me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was trying to be quiet, but not doing a great job of it. I stopped and listened. The footsteps stopped too. I took a few more steps up, and the footsteps started again. Someone was definitely following me. I turned around quickly and yelled, "Hey, who's there?" But I didn't see anyone. At that point, I was done playing games. I ran back down to the third floor and called the police from the office phone. While I was talking to the dispatcher, I kept watching the stairwell door, expecting someone to come through it any second. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. 2 officers came in and we searched the entire building together. We checked every office, every closet, the roof, everywhere. We didn't find a single person. But when we got to that third floor office where I had heard the typing, we found something that made my blood run cold. On the desk was a handwritten note that said, "Thanks for keeping me company." It was written on company letterhead, but in handwriting I didn't recognize. Next to it was a key to the building that wasn't supposed to exist. According to the building manager, they had only issued 3 keys total, and all 3 were accounted for. The police took the note and the key as evidence, but they never found out who had been in the building or how they got that key made. I finished out my 2 weeks' notice and found a different job. Day shift at a grocery store where there's always people around. I still wonder sometimes if that person is still getting into that building somehow, still playing their weird games with whoever took over my job. The whole thing taught me that some jobs just aren't worth the money, no matter how much you need it. Part of me feels bad for leaving the next guy to deal with whatever that was, but I learned my lesson about staying in situations that don't feel right. Sometimes your gut is trying to tell you something important, and you should listen to it before things get worse. This happened when I was 16, during my junior year of high school. My mom had to drive 3 hours away to take care of my sick grandmother for the weekend, and my dad was on a business trip until Monday. My younger sister was supposed to stay with her friend's family, so I had the whole house to myself for 2 days. I was pretty excited about it since I rarely got time alone at home. Friday night went normal. I ordered Chinese food, played some video games, and stayed up way too late. Saturday morning, I slept in until almost noon. When I finally got up, I made some breakfast and was just hanging around the house in my pajamas. Around 2 p.m., I was in the living room watching TV when I heard my mom's car pull into the driveway. I was confused because she wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday night. I figured maybe something had happened with my grandmother, or she had forgotten something at home. I heard the car door slam shut and footsteps walking up to the front door. Then I heard my mom's voice calling out, "Honey, I'm home early." But something felt off about it. Her voice sounded different somehow, like she had a cold or something. I called back, "Coming, Mom," and started walking towards the front door. But when I got there and looked through the peephole, there wasn't anyone on the porch. I could still hear my mom's car running in the driveway though. I opened the front door and stepped outside, but there was no car in the driveway. Nothing at all. I stood there for a minute trying to figure out what I had heard. Maybe it was a neighbor's car that sounded similar to my mom's. But I was pretty sure I had heard her voice too. I went back inside and locked the door. About an hour later, I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I heard it again. My mom's voice, but this time it was coming from upstairs. She was calling my name, but it sounded muffled, like she was calling from behind a closed door. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and called up, "Mom, is that you?" The voice called my name again, but it still sounded wrong. It was definitely my mom's voice, but it was too slow and deliberate, like someone was trying to imitate how she talked. I started walking up the stairs, but something in my gut told me to stop. I stood there on the staircase for a few minutes, listening. The voice called my name one more time, and this time I could tell it was coming from my parents' bedroom. But as I listened closer, I realized something that made my skin crawl. I could hear breathing that didn't match the voice, like someone was standing next to whoever was calling my name. Heavy breathing, like a man trying to stay quiet. I backed down the stairs as quietly as I could and grabbed my phone. I thought about calling my mom to see where she really was, but I was scared that if I made any noise, whoever was upstairs would know I was onto them. Instead, I snuck out the back door and ran to my neighbor's house. Mrs. Rodriguez was home and let me use her phone to call my mom. She answered right away and told me she was still at my grandmother's house, 3 hours away. She had been there all day. I told her what happened, and she said to call the police immediately. When the cops showed up, they searched the entire house. They didn't find anyone, but they found something that still gives me chills when I think about it. In my parents' bedroom, they found a small digital recorder sitting on my mom's nightstand. It had been recording for about 2 hours. When they played it back, we could hear everything that had happened. My footsteps downstairs, me calling up to ask if it was my mom, and then clear as day, we heard my mom's voice calling my name. But it wasn't live. Someone had been playing a recording of my mom's voice through the device. What really freaked me out was that you could hear someone breathing heavily on the recording, right next to where the device was sitting. And at the very end, right after I had left the house, you could hear a man's voice whisper, "Next time." The police never figured out how someone got into our house or how they got a recording of my mom's voice in the first place. They dusted for fingerprints but didn't find anything useful. We changed all the locks and installed a new security system, but I never felt safe in that house again. My mom came home that night and stayed with me until my dad got back from his trip. She was really shaken up about the whole thing, especially about someone having a recording of her voice. We never found out where that came from or how long someone had been planning this. The worst part is thinking about what would have happened if I had actually gone into that bedroom. Someone was up there waiting for me, and they had gone through a lot of trouble to lure me upstairs. They knew exactly what my mom sounded like and had planned this whole thing out. I still live in the same house, but I've never stayed alone overnight since then. Even now, when I hear my mom's voice calling me from another room, I always make sure I can see her before I respond. Sometimes your brain can play tricks on you, but other times, someone else is playing tricks on your brain. The police kept that digital recorder as evidence, but the case was never solved. Every once in a while, I wonder if that person is still out there, still trying the same thing on other families. Maybe they're better at it now. Maybe they've learned from their mistakes. I never told my friends the full details of what happened because I knew they'd think I was making it up or being paranoid. But I know what I heard, and I know someone was in my house that day. Someone who had been watching my family long enough to know exactly how to get me to come upstairs. The thing that bothers me most is that I almost fell for it. If my gut hadn't told me to stop on those stairs, I probably would have walked right into whatever trap they had set up. I learned that day to always trust that feeling when something doesn't seem right, even if you can't explain why.